everyone, Grant here from Spectre Racing. We're here today in Scott's garage to do the full supercharger install. So where we're at now, so we already did the disassembly. We got the intake manifold off and all the intake stuff. We got the radiator out, obviously. We got the all the hoses, coolant, so the wiring. We already started modifying some of the wiring and hoses that is required in the kit. So let's do a quick overview of all the parts we got here. So first of all, it is the Roush TVS R2300 Supercharger. It's a 2.3 liter supercharger. So it is a bit overkill for the 4.6 motor, but this supercharger has a very good resale value. With the different manifolds itself, it can fit into any car, any Ford really, all the from 05 to 16 to F-150s and whatnot. So that was the reasoning behind this. And also this supercharger is much more efficient than the 1.9 that they also sell, which actually just went out of production. So it's another reason why I bought this one. Wimpy, wimpy, wimpy. Hefty, hefty, hefty. So you see, one of the upgrades we did to the kit is the heat exchanger. So this is the heat exchanger it comes with. Just I think it's a single pass. Pretty dinky, pretty small, you know, with autocross, which is what 75% of the time what this car is going to do. It's a lot of full throttle and then sit. So in July, when it's like 100 degrees outside, this intercooler is not really going to do very much. So hence the VMP triple pass intercooler with dual fans. So, you know, when I'm sitting in grid and it's 100 degrees outside and get some airflow through it so the doesn't build up and heat soak while I'm in grid. Also while I'm out on track, you know, when I do the couple track days a year in this car. So the next upgrade is we got a Mishimoto radiator, and this radiator is about 25% larger than a stock one. We already threw the stock one out, so can't really show a direct comparison, but it is about almost twice as thick and same fitment and everything. Now in the car I don't have a condenser or anything, so there'll be a lot more airflow. And we also got some silicone hoses. Obviously we got it in red because that adds, you know, at least like 23 or 24 horsepower, obviously. Alright, so where we're at now, right now I have to modify the wiring harness. Supercharger requires a few extra little connectors here. So we're going to put the GoPro on time lapse and see how it goes from here. Alright, so we're on day 3. We did go to a Christmas party yesterday, so didn't get a lot done. But we got everything wired up. We got the VMP triple pass heat exchanger, although might have to dick around with some of the wiring. And fuel charge assemblies on, and we're putting on the blower. Ready?
I thought I should put a leg up.
No. do it. This is the easiest way to not drop this. Oh, I see. We gotta like take this bolt out, I guess.
What?
It doesn't seem to line up.
Yeah, what the heck is that? Oh,
You're not anywhere near.
hold on. Well, it's because of that.
It's also caught on this too. Yeah, there.
Unless they sit in it.
Oh. Oh, there you go.
Ha! Hooray for beer! Ta-da! Yeah, your tower base isn't gonna fit.
Well, let's see.
Oh shit!
It's got like much clearance. It fits!
You might need the solid motor mounts, otherwise the motor's gonna be like, and take it out. One of those problems that fix it if it actually happens.
Maybe I'll, well no, if I put foam underneath there it'll melt, but
Just shove some styrofoam in there, it's fine.
high temperature foam.
Alright.
Alright, we'll take over from here. Supposedly, because this one, because it like stays high and then drops down, because it's it wasn't actually the blower it runs into, it's the
Right.
intake that is what the clearance issue was. Because right here the other one would clear fine. But I also need to remove this though.
No codes.
Okay, so we're back from VMP. We got the car tuned, and obviously we got it all together. We didn't have too much footage from doing the final assembly, but back here in the garage, you can see everything's working. At the dyno, the car made 441 wheel horsepower and 399 wheel torque. So we kind of ran out of fuel pump towards the end. I could have squeezed a little bit more out of it because that's about 520 crank horsepower, and with this block you can get about 550 out of it before you start breaking stuff. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. That will give me a nice safety margin, so hopefully it doesn't blow up. I mean, if it does, I might end up running Scott's Corvette for a while. But I probably would build the motor and make like 700 horsepower, something stupid in the interim. But hopefully this should be good for a while. Don't really plan on doing too much to the car. As you can see right now, I got it up on the scales to help corner balance it after doing the coilover installation video you saw a while back. So the Supercharger did probably add, I didn't actually weigh it beforehand, it probably added about 200 pounds or so, but the weight distribution is still 55-45, and my cross weights, which is where you take either the front right and the rear front left and the rear right and the opposite of that, and you add them together, my cross weight is actually exactly 50%. So meaning when you load the car left and right, it should handle the same going both left and right turns. So we'll see that out in track and how it handles with the extra weight. But in total the car weighs, with a passenger, with me, I weigh about 180 pounds.
maybe a little bit more after the holidays, but the car weighs 3690-ish, 37, so that's not so bad. From the factory, Ford lists these cars at about anywhere from 3400 to 3600, so you know, all the weight loss I had out of this car. I have lighter seats, lighter drive shaft, no AC, no condenser. The back seats, although it's only like 20 pounds, no spare tire. But the weight I added back was obviously the supercharger. Now, I did replace the intake manifold, obviously, but it's still much heavier than the very light intake manifold, which you can see I have right here. Whereas I almost needed in the second person to carry the supercharger. You can see in this funny picture I have here. And I added the heat exchanger. So the VMP heat exchanger is very cool. The stock heat exchanger you saw it came with was very small. You know, it was a single pass. So I upgraded to the triple pass, and it really does make a cool noise when you turn it on. It almost sounds like some kind of electric car or something. So some people might annoy some people, but I really like it. And you can see right here, those two fans are very powerful. So some issues we had with the car with tuning, intake air temperature, which I believe when we rewired it, it's actually like your downstream air temperature now. With the cams, the way the cams operate, if I sit in idle, the intake air temperature actually climbs. So ironically, you know, when you get going, the car runs nice and cool, but if I sit there and idle endlessly, especially on a hot day, it would probably overheat, and I probably just wouldn't want to do anything crazy when it gets over like 170. So it's nice that the heat exchanger fans, they actually turn on with just the battery key. So come back from an autocross run, pull into the grid, turn off the motor, put battery on, and just run the fan. So that'll run the intercooler pump, and that'll run all the fluid through the supercharger. So it shouldn't hopefully heat soak too much. So how does it feel? Well, I haven't gotten it out on the drag strip yet, or you know, out on autocross or anything. So just driven around town. So one of the other problems I ran into is just driving around town, and it's, oh my God, is it louder? That is something I definitely didn't expect. When you think about it, it makes sense. You know, more air, you know, more combustion, all that stuff, more noise. But that actually might be a problem because a lot of autocross events have about like a 90 or 100 decibel noise ordinance, which I'm pretty sure this is violating now. Before, it was probably right at the cusp, so honestly I'm just going to wait and see. If first video is cut a little short, you know it's because I got kicked out, and I'll have to search for a much quieter muffler. I'll probably get something like designed for a GT500, maybe a bit more stock. Be kind of unfortunate because I'll lose a little bit of that rumble, but you know, you got to do what you got to do to be able to race, unfortunately, in some events. So that's it for the supercharger build. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to ask them below, or follow us up on our Facebook page, my Instagram, any of those things, all linked below. We will be doing a whole nother season of autocross next season with this car, following this car in the competition. So it should be a lot of fun. We're going to be competing against Scott in his Super Street Mod Z06 Corvette. So we both are going to have about the same power level, and then Mike in his GT350 is also going to be out competing, and he has only 6 more horsepower than me, but I make more torque, and my car is a little bit lighter. So it should be some fun competition next year. So be sure to subscribe, and thanks again.